I just realized Tyler Perry didn't direct this film, but let's break it down right now. A modern-day retelling of one of the most iconic love stories in the Bible. A young woman escapes the Atlanta music scene to care for an elderly widowed woman, and in the process, finds the love of her life and gains the mother she never had. Ruth Boaz is directed by Alana Brown, who is known for being a writer for the TV series Blindspotting and for the film Trees of Peace. Now, from what I can tell, this is Alana Brown's directorial debut, but this film definitely has Tyler Perry's fingerprints all over it. I will say the general tone and visual language of this film felt a lot more gentle and palatable than a lot of Tyler Perry directed projects. The color palette, shot composition, camera movement, even the use of space, which in my opinion was nicely done. The emotional tone in any one scene was pretty good, but the emotional direction of the actors maybe not so good. The actor's performance in this film always felt either too melodramatic or too syrupy sweet, and at times just flat out not believable. And that's a direct connect to the director's vision, which I will give Alana Brown some credit there. The biggest themes in this film is faith and love, and although in my opinion, the delivery of it still felt very artificial and Hallmark Channel-ish, but the film does do a good job of staying focused on the through line of faith and love. Now, besides the emotional tone, I also thought the film suffered a little bit from pacing and rhythm. The beginning needs a proper setup to settle us into the mood they're trying to create, and the ending needs at least a little bit of a runway to breathe so the movie as a whole feels satisfying and we can leave the film with whatever lasting impact they intended. That being said, I actually think the direction wasn't as bad as I anticipated coming in. However, the gaffes that are there are more pronounced than they are subtle, so 2 of 5 for direction and vision. So a big knock on Tyler Perry films is the production value. Sometimes there are glaring continuity errors or inconsistent lighting or sets that have that filmed play vibe. And despite his wealth, some of his films look cheap or rushed. And Ruth Boaz suffered from some of that too, but if I'm being honest, it wasn't as bad as some of his other projects. It still isn't to the level I think it should be for such a big studio, but besides the concert venue in the beginning and maybe the recording studio, the sets weren't that bad. I also thought the framing and composition were above average, and even though a lot of the lighting wasn't necessarily natural, it was still pleasing looking lighting. Well, there was a lot of RGB at times, but who doesn't like a little pop of color? And sure, while there wasn't any fancy camera movements or effects, the shots were high quality and did enough to frame the story in an appealing way. 3 of 5 for cinematography and visuals. So I usually try not to give too much away in these reviews, but we gotta discuss a few things. So let me give you a spoiler alert for this section right now. All right, so right off the top, let me just say, a lot of those common criticisms you hear about Tyler Perry films are going to show up in this film too. The formulaic plots, the one-dimensional characters, the melodrama overload, the stage play feel, the reliance on religion as a cure-all. Yeah, that was all still very present. Now, this is marketed as a faith-based film, as you can tell by the title. And for those that don't know, it is based off the story of Ruth and Boaz from the Bible. And for the most part, it actually does keep to that story, but of course, it has to be adapted for the current times. And of course, it has to have some signature Tyler tropes. And right from the beginning, you know it's coming when Phylicia Rashad narrates and says that this story starts with truth and trust and sometimes tragedy. I was like, uh-oh, here we go. Not even 15 minutes in, Phylicia Rashad's husband and son, who was Ruth's boyfriend, both die in a carjacking. Or, as Phylicia Rashad says in the film, a struggle. And of course, the sky falls when she finds out her husband leveraged everything and lost it all. But that's kind of what Tyler Perry films are, right? Plot devices and tropes, all one after the other, trying to pander to different targeted demographics. That being said, there were a few of his usual themes or stereotypes that were still there, but weren't quite as intense in this film like some that preceded it. Like, even though they killed off Phylicia Rashad's son, who was a darker complexion than Boaz, but at least he wasn't a huge dirtbag like most of us darker brothers on these films. Which brings me to writing. The dialogue was not good in my opinion, and in large part that's due to there not being a solid plot to help give any scene a motivation. So dialogue ends up just being words on a page that don't have any weight.
I hear a lot of talking, but the words don't mean shit.
But the real issue for me was how nonsensical things would get. Like the son bringing Phylicia Rashad to the club to introduce his girl to his mother for the first time. Or how her manager went from 0 to 100 because Ruth didn't want to sing anymore. Then there was the part where the Spanish chick tells Ruth she's not cut out for day labor work when she first meets her. But come on, I've never seen sexier day labor work than picking grapes at a vineyard. And on a side note, so Ruth and this other lady are struggling grape pickers during the day, but then get sexy and go clubbing at night? I don't know, that feel like it don't match, but I guess day laborers gotta have a life too. But now I can't stop thinking, how would that conversation really go if you met them at a bar? So, what do you do for a living?
I'm a day laborer.
A day laborer? Like, you wait outside of a Home Depot and jump into a flatbed of a stranger's truck and drive off to do manual labor?
Well, I mostly work at vineyards.
Wow.
I even stopped on those grapes you're drinking right now.
Anyway, there was also a ton of manufactured moments too, like Ruth getting stuck in a curtain and that turns into a mushy moment. But I will admit, the romantic dinner with Bo and Ruth crushing grapes was kind of a mood. In my opinion, it was probably the best scene in the film. Good pace, vibey lighting, decent music. With that in mind, to the film's credit, everything is done in a way that sort of works because these types of beats or the way it's framed are what give the audience that hit of serotonin that we all want when watching a love story. But because it's not connected to any real plot or a story with some depth, it all either feels hollow or, even worse, disingenuous. And even though the film does manage to capture a handful of tender moments, they aren't nearly enough to make up for all the other miscues. 1 of 5 for writing and storytelling. Before we get to the last 2 categories, please think about subscribing if you're enjoying this review. You don't even have to leave the video. Just hit that icon down there and you're good to go. Thank you. Back to the review. Ruth and Boaz stars Soraya as Ruth, who I thought was not awful, but not standout either. And I don't mean to be overly judgy, but I didn't love her singing, especially that Wildflower song, and her singing Wake Me Up. I bet Aloe Black is rolling over in his grave, because that was not. And I'm kidding. I know Aloe Black isn't dead, but if he was. Then there's Mike Epps, Tyler Lepley as Boaz. His performance was better than his counterparts, but not by a whole lot. He was likable though, even if he was a little overdramatic at times, like when he kicks the boards and screams, "God, what now?" He also couldn't say Ruth. He kept saying Ruth. "Ruth, where you going? I would never hurt you, Ruth."
Look at my roof. Look at my roof. Look at my roof.
Also, the chemistry between Ruth and Boaz wasn't horrible, actually, but it wasn't palpable either. Ruth and Boaz also stars Felicia Rashad as Naomi, and let me tell you something. Felicia Rashad is still as gorgeous as she was back in the day. She was easily the best actor in this film, but if I'm being real, even her performance was lacking a little. And in her and all the actors' defense, the writing and character profiles seem to give them nothing to work with. That being said, I hope Felicia gets involved in some future projects with a stronger role. The film also featured James Lee Thomas as Cyrus, which, credit to him, he seems to try and take this serious, but to me, he just wasn't believable for that role. He just wasn't menacing enough, and he was a little boring too. And lastly, I want to mention Nija Brennia. I hope I'm saying that right, but she played Brianna, Ruth's friend. Although her character was not particularly important, she was probably the most likable character in the film besides Boaz, and arguably the next best performance after Felicia. So I hope to see her on another project one day. There was a good bit of melodramatic performances in this film, but I'm not sure I blame the actors entirely. Regardless though, the acting wasn't so bad that you can't get through the film, but I wouldn't say it's a strength of the film either. 2 of 5 for performances and characters. So this is a cute little film, and I don't mean to be condescending, but if I am, I actually think it's fair. And here's what I mean. If you or I made this film, it's not that it wouldn't get seen or have a chance to do well, but it most definitely wouldn't be #1 on Netflix in one day. It's clear that Tyler Perry's name recognition is a big reason why this movie is so highly viewed, which is why this film is so disappointing to me. At this stage in the game, as prominent a figure as Tyler Perry is, the quality and lasting impact of his films should hit a lot harder than they do. And don't get me wrong, like I said earlier, I thought the production for this film was slightly better than most of his films, especially stuff I've seen more recently. Ruth and Boaz is promoted as a romance and faith-based film, but it's really only masquerading as the latter. It's really not about faith. It just uses it to pander to a specific demographic. I mean, the name of the film is Ruth and Boaz, and it's filled with biblical quotes and Christian affirmations, but no real message. And if that's not pandering, I don't know what is. And look, by definition, to pander suggests that you're giving the audience something that it wants. So if you're someone who feels like, yeah, it's not written particularly well, but I enjoyed the themes and the spirit of the film, well, I'm not here to tell you not to enjoy it. It does have spirit, and it is an easy watch, which is sometimes the best watch depending on your mood. And it's not that any one moment is terrible, or should I say isn't good. To me, it just doesn't mean anything and is a little contrived. And by movie's end, I'm not really feeling anything. And that's disappointing because I'd like to. Personally, I think the impact is a 1, but because I know it's going to resonate with a certain demo, I'll give it a 2 for overall execution and impact. All in all, that gives Ruth and Boaz a score of 10, which puts it in the ranking of wait for streaming, which this film was obviously released to streaming, but these rankings were designed around classic movie release structure. So I guess just think of it as the score of 10 out of 25. Don't forget to check out my movie phone videos and get a fun, different take on movie reviews, new and old. Did you see Ruth and Boaz? What ranking would you give it? Let me hear it in the comments. If you'd like to see more of my Earnest and movie phone reviews, please subscribe for much more. Thank you for watching.